After an entire season building up to finding a way out of this place and building the radio, they finally did it, but things go from hopeful to worse than ever when this is the guy who picks up.
Whoa, slow down. Is this Jim?
Sorry, what?
Jim Matthews.
Who is this?
Your wife shouldn't be digging that hole, Jim.
Honestly, after that answer, it really makes Donna's words to Kenny in the bar hit that much deeper, because the radio failed and it failed big time. But maybe the call wasn't meant to be hostile. Maybe it was a warning. It's crazy to think about, but what if it wasn't meant to be a threat? When Jade talks to Kenny in Boyd's house and asks what this place is and what's its purpose, etc., the radio starts going off on its own. Kenny tells us that that's a frequent occurrence and it's something that happens all the time. It's something that happens a lot. When Boyd goes to visit Ionabi's grave for the first time in a really long while, he talks to her about his desire to go exploring in the woods to look for a way to live from land. He wants to make an impact. He wants to make a change for the people living here before he dies from his illness. But he has doubts about if it's the right thing to do, so he asks Abby to give him a sign on whether or not he should go or he should just stay. Later on, he gets his sign when their song came on the radio, and he takes that as confirmation that it's okay for him to keep going, that he should proceed with his plan. And something really interesting is that multiple times in the series, we've seen these lights flashing over and over by themselves, in the same way that the radios also start emitting static by themselves. It's almost like they're struggling to pass a transmission out. And considering that we saw an operational lighthouse in the final episode of season 1, it seems like there's other people in the world of From outside of the main town. And what we see in episode 1 of season 2 just confirms that. Somebody chained up the old man in the dungeon. But if that guy on the phone wasn't a monster, then how did he know Jim's name? How did he know that Jim was going to turn on the radio at that specific time? We know that even the monsters can't see what everyone is doing at all times, because before the talismans were created, the monsters couldn't tell where people were actually hiding. They had to manually look for them slowly, one at a time. It's almost like they're being drip-fed information by someone else or someone who isn't even a monster, rather than them having some sort of supernatural sight that allows them to see everybody. It's very possible that if there's other groups in Fromland, that they simply sent a spy to Boyd's town, someone whose job is to monitor things and keep them from doing something too crazy. Or maybe the guy from the radio just has magical powers. I don't know at this point. I don't know. But in the final episode of season 1, the boy in white tells Sarah that Nathan was right about Fromland, that the harder you push, the harder it pushes back. Considering this, it's not impossible that there's a group or groups of humans living in Fromville who've dedicated themselves to upholding that status quo. A group or someone whose entire mission is to prevent people from making things worse in Fromland. So when they get people like Jim and Tabitha, they want to stop them no matter what it takes. The voices told Sarah that the last time 2 cars showed up, everybody died. And it was because of the people from the 2 cars. And supposedly, that's why they told Sarah she had to kill Ethan and Jade's friend. So when the voice says, "Better tell your wife to stop digging that hole, Jim," it sounds like a threat, 100%. But maybe it's a warning that if you keep pushing this place the way you've been doing, it's going to ramp up the ante to levels that you can't imagine. And it's right after this happens, right after Jim makes the radio call, that Tabitha bursts through her basement floor. So there's a lot of things they're doing to anger Fromland at that moment. So Fromland, in retaliation, brings in an entire bus full of victims. And maybe that's what the guy on the radio wanted to prevent. Something worth considering is the guy who answered the radio may not be a monster or a human, but a soul, like one of the voices that Sarah talks to all the time. we know that the voices aren't unified in their goals because multiple times they've made conflicting moves from each other. He was also a male voice, and Sarah said Ion Abbey was the first female voice she's ever had. Coincidentally, it happened in the town, while she only had Abby when her and Boyd were very deep into the woods. It's interesting to note that these voices might be contained somehow between specific places. In the forest, Sarah doesn't hear those male voices even once. Go watch my other video on the voices and you'll understand why I think they don't all have the same goals. But it's interesting to consider the possibility, the idea that the guy on the radio isn't an enemy. Maybe he isn't even an ally. Maybe he's just neutral. He's just in the middle. A lot of people have said that it could be the bartender because he has a radio and he also has a cryptic conversation with Tabitha where he says he's seen lots of people trying to live from land, but it never works. And what he said doesn't really make sense because apart from Jade and the Matthews, we never see anybody trying or being mentioned that they try to find a way out apart from them, at least for the people in this town at this moment. But if that guy has been here for a longer time, or if from a different town or different village or whatever settlement, then maybe he's seen lots of people doing that and they've always failed. I definitely believe that there's someone living in the woods, some sort of caretaker or something like that for Fromland itself, and that there's also someone living in the lighthouse. But it's hard for me to say whether the guy who talked to Jim on the radio is even alive at all. Watch my video about who owns the dogs to see my thoughts about the guy in the woods, and I have some ideas about what the purpose of the lighthouse is, so very soon I'll make a video on that. And now that the first episode of season 2 is out, and after seeing the chained up old guy, it's definitely made me believe in that theory more, the theory that there's other groups of people trying to maintain the status quo in Fromland. Anyways, let me know your thoughts and theories about who or what you think the voice that answered the radio is in the comments, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.